Hello and welcome to Pints with Aquinas. I'm Father Gregory Pine. In this episode, we're going to talk about raising your kids Catholic and how you stand a chance at succeeding in that effort. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay, so this is from a question by one Mike Mascaro, who asks, what's the most effective way of evangelizing and properly catechizing our children? Do you have any recommendations for books that younger students would be able to digest that detail the faith in simple but profound ways? Okay, I've thought about this question some before. I hope that I've thought about the question well. There are no guarantees, but typically in these conversations, I would recommend three things. So the first thing would be to cultivate a habit of prayer. Second thing would be to do what you can to grow chastity or to safeguard chastity. And then the third thing would be lives of the saints, none of which seem especially catechetical or study-based, but I think I have reasons for that. So, perhaps you've come across some of these lines for Aristotle, and I'll say things like, you're not ready to study serious metaphysics until kind of later in life. People give different dates. I've forgotten what the actual date is, so there you have it, my friends. That's an excellent quotation brought to you by Father Gregory Pine. But there's a sense that while you're young and your imagination is still making lots of images or receiving lots of images, and you haven't yet honed your capacity for abstract thought, it's good to kind of feed the mind, as it were, with things that are more digestible or things that are more appetible. I once read an essay by Dorothy Sayers, and she gives a little apology for a trivium education, trivium and quadrivium education. Trivium being like, first you study grammar, and then you study dialectic, and then you study rhetoric. And she says basically that these three stages track with the development of the human person through, youth and adolescence. So at the time when a child is well disposed to memorize everything that's said, which she calls the poll parrot stage, it's at that point that you would do a lot of grammar, that you would give the kid a lot of opportunities to memorize things. And then, as the child gets more kind of contentious, then you would enter into dialectic, right, which is just the discipline of argumentation. And then as the child kind of waxes more poetical, then you would get into rhetoric, right? You would get into this kind of art of persuasion, so that what you propose corresponds with the shape of the heart, or corresponds with the development of the particular individual's habits of mind, which, help them to assimilate what is true. Okay, that's all background. But when it comes to learning the faith, I think sometimes, I don't think that it's especially helpful to go too, what am I thinking right now? Abstract or too heavy hitting at too early an age. So for instance, I didn't read St. Thomas Aquinas before I went to college. Is that a reason why you shouldn't, teach your kids St. Thomas Aquinas before they go to college? No, I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm just speaking anecdotally. But the things that certainly benefited me are the things that the things by which my faith were most encouraged, or by which my faith were most safeguarded, were the things that I listed. So habit of prayer, safeguard chastity, and then lives of the saints. So my family was very insistent on daily prayer. Well, my dad, in a big way, was insistent on daily prayer. So we would pray a family rosary. And that was just kind of like a staple. It was not something that I loved for many years. It was not something that I looked forward to each night, but it was something that I knew was going to happen. And, a lot of habituation that parents visit upon their children is of just such a sort. Kids often don't like taking showers. Kids don't like brushing their teeth. Kids don't like sharing. But those are things that all need to be taught. And so too with the faith. Now, some people have the mind, well, shouldn't it be freely chosen? And isn't it best if... No, okay, just teach your kids how to pray. And the way that you do that is by modeling it, and then by living it and inviting them into that. And when I say inviting them into that, I mean, making them. And I think it's good if it's the type of prayer that's doable, right? So you don't necessarily want to have your kids praying for many hours each day in such a way that may subsequently traumatize them and turn them away from the faith, but give them something that's doable. And I think the rosary is a good example of that. The second thing is safeguard chastity. So I think that everyone has an aspect of their Christian vocation which entails healing of a certain sort. So all of us need to heal, and all of us suffer as a result of the experiences that we have throughout the course of our lives. But I think that some of that suffering can be avoided. And I think a lot of the suffering associated with sexual sin can be avoided, but it requires just great, great vigilance. So pornography is something to which children are, are exposed at a very, very young age. And the way that people tell these stories, apparently that age gets younger and younger and younger. But insofar as you, as parents, are capable of delaying that exposure or of guarding your children from that exposure in a way that's not like weird or creepy, I think that's good. So for instance, like Matt often talks about installing Covenant Eyes on all the devices in your home, and just kind of being careful about whose houses the kids go to, because, let's say that your house is the type of environment where your computer is in a public place and your kids aren't necessarily going to have access to pornography. But if they go over to a friend's house and it's more readily available, that'll be the setting, or that'll be the place in which they fall for the first time. So that your vigilance might extend also to your children's friends' houses. And then when it comes to devices and stuff, I think that a lot of parents these days are of the mind that it's probably not best that their kids spend many hours in front of screens. So you're trying to curtail that, but also, try to delay the point at which your children gets a cell phone, and especially a smartphone. So your reasons for which should be principled. It's not just like, these things are bad, and so I'm going to isolate you from all your friends and ensure that all social engagements that take place in high school are ones from which you are excluded. Because your children are going to feel that acutely, and they're probably going to resent you for it. But it's a matter of how much resentment you're willing to put up with, conscious of the fact that cell phone, and especially a smartphone, means like real risk. So in my mentality, like I was given a cell phone. I was given a dumb phone when I was 16 and a half, when I started driving on my own. I thought that made sense. Now, mind you, at that point, I don't think there were smartphones in whatever it was, 2004, 5. Yeah, I don't know. The first iPhone probably came out right about then. And so times they are changing, and as a result of which your vigilance will take a different shape. But I think it's for parents to be really vigilant about safeguarding chastity in their kids so that their children have less healing to do when it comes to those types of wounds which are inflicted by sexual sin. So that's the second thing. So first thing is instill a habit of prayer. Second thing is safeguard chastity. And third thing is read Lives of the Saints. And the reason for which I say that is because we all want to be inspired, right? We don't just want to be told what the law is and then have it like foisted upon us in a way that we find oppressive, and as if to say that like the only thing that the faith gives is a bunch of rules and insistence upon obedience, because we know that not to be true. The way in which the faith, begets a new life in us is far more expansive, it's far more rich. And I think that you see that in people, and I think that stories are an especially wonderful way by which to convey that. So I think that Lives of the Saints are often icons of the whole Christian life, in fact, and icons that are especially adept or especially excellent at accomplishing the goal of conversion. So for me, I remember reading little Lives of Saints, or my mom reading them to me when we were little kids. She used to have these little books, Saints at 6 o'clock and More Saints at 6 o'clock or something like that. And then we would get, she used to run this Catholic bookstore in our town, and I remember getting like 57 saints for blah, 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 and thus and such, and she'd read one to me each night. Not, every night of every year, but some nights of some years. And I remember just like reading the story of St. Tarcisius and the way in which he loved the Eucharist. I remember just being really moved by that. It was, where was it? I was probably like 10. And then I got into these books by Louis de Waal, which Ignatius Press republished probably about 25 years ago. There's probably like 11, 12, 13 of them, something like that. But I remember reading the one about St. Francis Xavier and just getting all stirred up. The book's called Set All Afire. And then the one about St. Thomas Aquinas called The Quiet Light was the one that basically made me want to become a Dominican. So the saints' lives are ways in which the life of Christ is kind of refracted through creation, and they tell something about God which is kind of only visible or only accessible through the way in which they lived. And I think, as a result of which their vocations are distinct and unrepeatable and historical contingent and sweet. And I think that that's the type of way in which we can inspire a subsequent generation of Christian saints. So, yeah, in review, my thoughts are these. One, you want to instill a habit of prayer, because prayer is the safeguard to all sound reasoning of the faith. Because, philosophy and theology takes place in the context of the life of faith, and without it, it just drifts. It drifts into like vain, idle speculation or just a trick of memorization. So theology, the study of the faith, has to be fired by faith, hope, love, in order that it might tend to its genuine end and that it might inspire the Christian with a real affection for the object of study. So yeah, instill a habit of prayer. Second, it's said by St. Thomas Aquinas that sins of the flesh cloud the mind. I've said excuse me twice in the past 5 seconds, so I should stop saying excuse me. It's like when somebody tells you not to say sorry, and you're like, sorry, I said sorry. You're like, no. But St. Thomas talks in the Treatise of Faith, it's like hebituda mentis et, whatever. It dulls the mind and it deadens the heart. Sexual sins do both. And so they are to be avoided, as a result of which, because we want to be supernaturally alive to the realities of the faith. And if you have to do a lot of healing from sins against the virtue of chastity, it just makes it far more difficult. So if your children can be spared that, God be praised. And then Lives of the Saints, because they are beautiful illustrations of the grace of Christ at work in our members up until the present day, up until the present moment. And they inspire in us a love for the realities proposed, rather than just appealing to obedience, discipline, etc. All of which are good things, but good things contextually. Because in the end, it pertains to the lover to sing. And we want to sing of the Christian life rather than merely drudge through it. So that's my prayer for you. Please pray for me in that regard. Subscribe to Pints with Aquinas. Push the subscribe button, then push the bell, and other stuff happens, and that stuff is cool. If you haven't yet checked out Godsplaining, Godsplaining, it's a podcast to which I contribute with 4 other Dominican friars. It's kind of like a Catholic miscellany. The hope is that it'll help you to cast a contemplative gaze on all of your contemporary affairs. So the tagline is Contemplative Preachers, Contemporary Age. And we've got like 30-minute episodes on Thursdays, guests twice a month, live streams twice a month. And then Lectio Divina is on the Sunday readings for penitential seasons, Christmas and Easter. So it's sweet. All right, I'm going to call it with that. Keep it funky, keep it fresh. Catch you next time.